The room laughed when Elsie Marr asked for the switchboard back. It happened at the Millhaven County Infrastructure meeting, under fluorescent lights, with rain tapping lightly against the courthouse windows and a digital presentation glowing behind the engineers. On the screen was the future. A new dam alarm network, automated flood calls, satellite weather feeds, sensor towers, backup batteries, and a contract worth more than anything Millhaven had ever spent on public safety. Then Elsie stood up. She was 82, wearing a brown raincoat, buttoned wrong at the collar, holding a cloth notebook filled with handwritten line numbers. Her voice shook only once when she said the old telephone exchange still had emergency routes, the new system did not. A few people turned to look at her. One commissioner, Sahil. The young engineer at the front gave the kind of smile people use when they want an old person to sit down without feeling insulted. "Mrs. Marr," he said, "with respect, that switchboard is not a safety system. It is an antique." Someone in the back chuckled. Elsie lowered her eyes to the notebook. On one page were names of farms that no longer appeared on county maps. On another were 3 words her old supervisor had written in 1968 after the last dam scare: "Never cut line 7. The engineer moved to the next slide. The county voted to remove the board. And 48 hours later, when the dam alarms went silent, Elsie would have to decide whether breaking into a condemned building was still a crime if it was the only way to make a town hear the truth. If stories about forgotten people, old promises, and things the world was too quick to throw away mean something to you, consider subscribing. Because what happened in Millhaven was not just about an old switchboard, a broken alarm, or one woman nobody believed. It was about the names a modern system forgot to carry forward. The meeting room smelled of wet wool, old coffee, and projector heat. Outside, March rain slid down the courthouse windows. It was not frightening yet, only steady, the kind that filled ditches while people told themselves nothing was wrong. Inside, Millhaven County was being shown its future. On the screen, behind Reed Carver, a clean blue map of the valley glowed under fluorescent lights. Every road had a line. Every sensor tower showed green. Every registered home below the dam appeared as a white square. Reed stood beside it with a wireless remote in his hand. He was 34, polished, careful, and confident because every number on the screen agreed with him. "This system gives Millhaven full digital redundancy," he said. "Automated sirens, flood calls, satellite weather feeds, battery-supported towers. If the dam reaches warning stage, every registered residence is contacted within 90 seconds. A low murmur of approval moved through the room. Commissioner Marla Vance leaned toward her microphone. "That is why we are comfortable proceeding with the removal of obsolete equipment from the old telephone exchange property." She said obsolete like rotten. The slide changed. The old exchange appeared on the screen. Tired brick beside the railroad cut, boarded windows, cracked steps, and a white notice on the door. "Condemned. North Lake Data Relay has made a formal offer to purchase and redevelop the site," Marla continued. "Interior equipment will be removed Friday morning." Friday. Elsie Marr felt the words settle in her chest. Her nephew Jonah sat beside her. When she reached for the cloth notebook, he lowered his voice. "Aunt Elsie," he whispered, "please don't." She stood anyway. The room quieted slowly. Marla looked over her glasses. "Mrs. Marr?" Elsie held the notebook against her ribs. "That switchboard should not be removed." Reed gave her a soft, professional smile. "We understand there is sentimental value attached to the building." "It is not sentimental." A few people shifted. Elsie opened the notebook. Her fingers looked thin, but they found the right page. Line numbers, farm names, old route marks written by women who had spent their lives connecting one voice to another. "There are emergency routes in that board that are not on your screen," she said. Reed glanced at the map. "Every active residence in the flood zone has been entered into the database." "No," Elsie said. "Every residence the county still names." For the first time, the room tightened. Marla's mouth drew into a line. "Mrs. Marr, if you have address concerns, submit them through public safety." "I did. They were reviewed. They were dismissed." Someone near the back chuckled. Jonah closed his eyes. Reed stepped closer to the aisle. "With respect, that switchboard has no inspection, no approval, no data interface, and no legal operating status. It does not need a data interface to tell you who lives at the end of a line. It cannot tell us anything if the lines are dead." Elsie looked down. She had heard men call wires dead before, as if a thing died when they forgot how to use it. "My supervisor wrote this after the dam scare in 1968, she said. Then she read the 3 words aloud. "Never cut line 7. The silence lasted half a breath. Marla exhaled into the microphone. "We cannot delay a county infrastructure transfer because of a 60-year-old handwritten note." Reed softened his voice. "Mrs. Marr, you served this county well. But we don't run towns with chords and guesswork anymore." There it was. Not shouted, not cruel, almost kind. That made it worse. Elsie looked at the clean blue map behind him, then at the empty space near the bend in the river where the map showed nothing but county land. There should have been homes there. Not many, but enough. Marla called for the vote. 3 hands rose. The motion passed. The old telephone exchange would be cleared Friday morning. The switchboard would be removed as salvage. The new dam alarm system would remain the only approved warning network. Jonah helped Elsie into her raincoat. At the door, Reed paused beside her. "If there are old addresses you're worried about, send them to my office. I'll have someone look." Elsie met his eyes. "You already looked." Then, she stepped into the rain. Across town, the old exchange sat dark behind its condemned notice. Inside, the switchboard waited under dust and yellow tape, its cords hanging like tired vines, its cloth tags faded but not blank. Elsie still had the brass key, and now she had until Friday. Elsie Marr had learned the valley by sound before she ever learned it by map. At 17, she took a job inside Millhaven's telephone exchange, a brick building near the railroad cut that smelled of warm wood, dust, raincoats, and copper wire. She had not planned to stay, but the first time she sat before the switchboard, the valley became a living thing breathing through her headset. A ring was never just a ring. Marr Farm East rang in 2 short bursts, because Mr. Marr always turned the crank too fast. Hollow Bend Schoolhouse rang sharp and impatient. The Pike Place rang slowly, like the old woman there hated asking for help. Lower Valley Camp had a faint scratch beneath every voice, because its wire crossed wet ground by the river bend. Elsie learned them all, but Edna Rill taught her what they meant. Edna was the night supervisor, a square-built woman with iron-gray hair, flat shoes, and a voice that could quiet a room without rising. She knew which widows would never call unless the stove had gone out, and which families below the dam needed 3 rings because the telephone hung in a crowded kitchen. "A line is not wire," Edna told Elsie. "A line is somebody waiting to be reached." Elsie wrote that sentence in the back of her training notebook. For years, she thought she understood it. Then came the rain of 1968. It began on a Tuesday evening and stayed until the valley turned the color of old tin. The river climbed the stones below the bridge. Water ran down pasture roads. By midnight, the dam office called the exchange twice in 20 minutes, and Edna's face changed before she hung up. "Wake the board," she said. Every operator sat forward. Elsie was 27 by then, married only 6 months, still young enough to believe adults always knew the next right thing. Edna handed her a route card marked in red pencil. "Line 7. Lower Valley first," Edna said. "No skipping, no waiting for sirens. If a house answers, tell them to get high. If they do not answer, call the next one and send word through the neighbor." Elsie plugged the cord in with shaking fingers. One by one, she rang the homes below the dam. Marr Farm East, Hollow Bend Schoolhouse, Pike Crossing, the old pump house, 3 rental cottages by the bend, Lower Valley Camp. Some voices were angry at being woken. Some were frightened before she finished speaking. One man said he had no truck. A woman asked if she should bring blankets. A child answered and ran barefoot to wake his grandfather. By dawn, the water had not broken the dam. The official report later called it a false alarm. Edna did not. She stood behind Elsie while morning light came gray through the exchange windows and said, "Remember this. The day they call it false is the day they start forgetting why we were ready." 2 weeks later, Edna wrote 3 words inside Elsie's notebook. "Never cut line 7. For a long time, no one did. Then Millhaven changed in the slow way towns do when people with clean shoes start calling old places inefficient. The dam office got better gauges. The telephone company buried new cable along the highway, not the river road. County maps began using cleaner names. Lower Valley Camp became county maintenance land. The cottages by the bend became service lots. The people still living there were no longer called a neighborhood. They were called exceptions. Elsie noticed. Not at first. Not enough. That was the part that still hurt. By then she was in her 40s, with bills to pay and a mother who needed care. Supervisors told her the emergency routes had been modernized. When she asked about Line 7, a man from the county office said the camp was empty now. When she asked Edna, the old supervisor had already retired. Elsie accepted the answer, because accepting was easier than challenging men who carried folders. Years later, when Edna died, Elsie found an envelope tucked inside a Christmas card. Inside was the brass key to the old exchange room. No long letter, no explanation, only a scrap of paper with Edna's tight handwriting. If they ever say the line is dead, ask who stopped listening. Elsie kept the key in a blue tin beside her bed. She kept the notebook wrapped in cloth. She kept working until the exchange closed, until digital routing replaced the operators, until the old building became storage, then surplus, then condemned. She told herself the valley was safer now. Faster systems, better towers, cleaner maps. But sometimes, in rain, she woke before dawn hearing a faint ring that was not in the room. Jonah said memory did that to people. Maybe it did. He loved her in the worried way of a man who had already lost too much family. He fixed her porch rail, brought groceries, and circled assisted living brochures. You gave that town 40 years, he told her. You don't owe them the rest of your life. Elsie had not known how to answer, because it was not the town she owed. It was the people at the end of the line. After the county meeting, she came home with humiliation sitting cold in her bones. She opened the blue tin, took out Edna's key, and laid it beside the notebook. The brass had gone dull with age, but it still fit her palm. Outside, the rain kept falling. Elsie turned to the page marked line 7 and traced the old route with one finger. For the first time in years, she wondered whether she had not protected Edna's warning. Maybe she had only protected her own comfort. And if that was true, Friday was not just a deadline for the switchboard. It was the last chance Elsie Marr had to ask who the county had stopped listening to. The old telephone exchange had 2 doors. The front door belonged to the county now. It had a condemned notice, a new padlock, and a strip of yellow tape that fluttered whenever wind moved through the railroad cut. The back door belonged to memory. It was narrow, swollen from years of rain, and hidden behind a tangle of winter vines. Elsie went to the back door before sunrise. She had not told Jonah. That was the first small lie of the morning. The rain had thinned to a mist, but water still dripped from the roofline and gathered in the broken mortar beneath her shoes. She stood for a moment with Edna Rill's brass key in her hand, feeling the cold of it against her palm. For almost 30 years, she had carried that key without using it. Now the lock resisted once, then turned. The smell inside struck her first. Dust, damp plaster, old paper, warm wood that had not been warm in years. There was also something metallic beneath it all, faint but familiar, like pennies held too long in a closed fist. Elsie stepped into the exchange room and pulled the door shut behind her. Morning light came through the boarded windows in thin gray strips. The county had stacked broken office chairs near one wall. A file cabinet lay on its side. Someone had rolled up carpet and left it beneath a leak. Everything looked abandoned except the switchboard. It stood at the far end of the room, tall, dark, patient. A wall of oak and brass, wider than a church pew, with rows of small round jacks and cords hanging in loose loops below them. The cloth around the cords had browned with age. Some were frayed near the plugs. The crank handle on the side had lost its shine. Dust covered the shelf where operators once laid pencils, route cards, coffee cups, and folded notes from people who could not afford long-distance calls. To a county inspector, it was a hazard. To North Lake Data Relay, it was salvage. To Reed Carver, it was a thing without certification. Elsie stood before it and saw the valley, not as roads and parcels, but as voices. Here was Hollow Bend Schoolhouse. Here was the Pike Crossing. Here was the South Road Farm where Mrs. Ivers used to call the doctor every winter because her husband refused to admit his chest hurt. Here was the number Edna used to ring twice, pause, then ring again because the old bell in that farmhouse stuck in cold weather. The switchboard had never been pretty. Even when new, it had been practical. It took fingerprints, coffee stains, worry, midnight calls, and storm warnings. It held the work of women whose names never appeared on county plaques. Women who connected births, fires, funerals, lost cattle, broken bridges, and one frightened child who once called because his mother would not wake up. Elsie touched the first row of jacks. "Still here," she whispered. A mouse moved somewhere behind the wall. She opened her notebook and began comparing the old route names to the cloth tags still tied beneath the plugs. Many were faded beyond use. Some had been replaced with typed paper decades ago. Others were missing entirely, leaving only a pale thread where the tag had been. That was what worried her. Not the dust, not the dead smell, the missing places. She moved slowly from left to right. Mar Farm East, Hollow Bend, Pike North, Church Road, Pump House, River Bend. Then a gap. Elsie leaned closer. There, half tucked behind a bundle of dead cable, was a tag turned backward. She reached in carefully, her sleeve catching on a splinter. The tag did not want to move. For one sharp second, she thought it might tear apart in her hand. Then it flipped. The writing was brown with age, but still readable. L. V. Camp, line 7. Elsie stopped breathing. She had expected the line to be remembered in the notebook. She had expected Edna's warning to be real because she needed it to be real. But seeing the tag still tied to the board was different. It was not memory anymore. It was evidence. She touched the letters with one finger. L. V. Camp. Not county land. Note maintenance lot. Not empty floodplain. Camp. Behind her, the back door opened. Elsie turned too fast and had to catch the edge of the switchboard to steady herself. Sheriff Cora Daly stood in the doorway, with rain on her hat brim and disappointment in her face. "Elsie," she said quietly. Elsie did not hide the notebook. There was no point. Cora stepped inside and looked around the room. She was in her 50s, broad-shouldered, careful with her words. Her father had been a volunteer fireman. Her mother had worked laundry at the old hospital. She understood old buildings better than most officials did, but she wore a badge, and the badge belonged to the county before it belonged to memory. "You know you are not supposed to be in here," Cora said. "I know. This building is condemned. So they keep saying." Cora looked past her at the switchboard. "And that thing is not worth getting arrested over." Elsie turned back to the board. "That thing rang 87 homes in one night. In 1968. People still live below the dam. They have the new alert system." Elsie pointed to the cloth tag. "Not if the system does not know their names." Cora came closer despite herself. She read the tag. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Cora said, "Lower Valley Camp was cleared years ago. That is what they told us. Do you know different?" Elsie wanted to say yes. She wanted certainty. She wanted the kind of answer that would make all those years of unease become righteous instead of guilty. But the truth was smaller and more painful. "I know Edna Rill told me never to cut this line," she said. "I know this tag was turned around, not removed. And I know the new map at the courthouse has nothing where this says people once waited for a call." Cora's mouth tightened. Outside, a truck passed on the wet road, its tires hissing through water. The sound faded toward the dam road. "You need to leave," Cora said. Elsie closed the notebook. Cora reached for the tag, then stopped herself before touching it. "If you have proof, bring it through the proper channel." "I tried proper channels. Try again. They have until Friday." Cora looked at the old board, at the cords, at the dust, at the yellow tape visible through the front hall. Then she looked at Elsie. "I am going to lock this door," she said. "And if I find you in here again, I will have to write it down." Elsie heard the kindness hidden inside the warning. Cora was not saying she wanted to arrest her. She was saying next time, there might be witnesses. Elsie put the brass key back into her coat pocket. Cora saw it. Her eyes dropped to the pocket, then lifted again. She said nothing. That silence told Elsie more than permission would have. They left through the back door together. Cora locked it. The padlock clicked shut, but Elsie had already seen what she needed. As she walked home through the thinning rain, the county's clean blue map came back to her mind. Green towers, white squares, empty land near the river bend, and behind that clean empty space, a faded cloth tag kept saying the name. The map refused to say. L. V. Camp. Line 7. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Elsie Marr was standing inside the Millhaven County Public Safety Office with her notebook pressed flat against the counter. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low over the valley, gray and heavy enough to make every fluorescent light inside the building seem too bright. Behind the counter, a young clerk looked at Elsie's notebook, Then, at the printed photograph she had brought from the exchange room, the photograph showed a faded cloth tag tied beneath a row of dark brass jacks. LV Camp, line 7. I need this added to the emergency review, Elsie said. Before Friday. The clerk did not touch the paper. Do you have a current address? It is not one address. It is a route. The clerk blinked. The system needs addresses. That is the problem. Within 20 minutes, Reed Carver came out from the back office. He looked tired, not from age, but from a man who had spent the morning answering questions he believed should already have been settled. Still, he did not dismiss Elsie at the counter. He brought her into a small conference room and opened the county flood database on a wall screen. Show me where you think this is, he said. Elsie stood close to the map. Her finger hovered over the bend in the river below the dam, where the old road used to dip behind cottonwoods. There. Right Zometin. The screen sharpened. Parcel lines appeared. Road numbers. Utility markers. A drainage ditch. A maintenance easement. No homes. No camp. No emergency call points. There is nothing registered there, Reed said. There used to be. I am not saying there wasn't. I am saying there is nothing active in the system now. Elsie opened the notebook. Mar Farm East. Hollow Bend Schoolhouse. Pike Crossing. Pump House. River Bend Cottages. Lower Valley Camp. That was the order in 1968. Reed studied the page longer than she expected. For a moment, she saw something in his face shift from politeness to calculation. Not belief, exactly, but attention. Then he looked back at the screen. Mrs. Marr, old route names are not enough. If people live there now, they should be on tax records, utility records, emergency services, postal routes somewhere. They may be somewhere under another name. Then we need that name. Elsie heard how reasonable he sounded. That was the trouble with reasonable men. They could build a wall out of correct sentences. Before she could answer, Commissioner Marla Vance entered without knocking. She carried a folder against her hip and wore a blue coat that still had rain beads on the sleeves. Her eyes went first to Reed, then to the screen, then to Elsie's open notebook. This has already been reviewed, Marla said. Reed closed his mouth. Elsie did not. No, she said. It was filed away. Marla placed the folder on the table. The exchange property transfer is under contract. Equipment removal begins Friday. Northlake has crews scheduled. The county has inspection deadlines. We cannot hold a public safety modernization project because of a handwritten route from 1968. That handwritten route woke people before the sirens did, and now we have sirens. If the sirens know who to call. Marla's face stayed still. Elsie looked down at the photograph of the tag. It had seemed stronger in her kitchen. Here, beneath the office lights, it looked small. A scrap of cloth, brown letters, old cord, a thing any lawyer could call sentimental. Marla softened her voice, the way Reed had softened his at the meeting. Let your nephew take you home. That was when Elsie saw Jonah standing in the doorway. He had followed her. His face held worry first, then embarrassment, then something worse. Fear that everyone in the room might be right about her. Aunt Elsie, he said, come on, I am not finished. You are. For today. Marla gathered the folder. Reed, please return to the system review. The meeting ended without anyone saying it had ended. Jonah walked Elsie out through the lobby. He did not speak until they reached the parking lot, where wet leaves stuck to the tires of county trucks. You can't keep doing this, he said. Doing what? Walking into offices like they owe you obedience because you remember something from 50 years ago. Elsie turned to him. The words had hurt him before they hurt her. She could see that. Jonah had never been cruel. He was tired. He was scared. He had already watched his mother disappear into confusion piece by piece, and now he was watching Elsie stand in public rooms with old notebooks and impossible warnings. I am not confused, Elsie said. I know you don't think you are. That was worse than if he had shouted. He drove her home in silence. But Elsie did not stay there. Near dusk, she walked back to the old exchange by the long road behind the church, where the county trucks could not see her from the main street. She knew Cora had locked the back door. She also knew old buildings kept more than one way in. A narrow basement window sat half-covered by weeds. It had never latched right. Elsie pushed it open with both hands and lowered herself through slowly, her knees protesting, her coat catching on splintered wood. Inside, the exchange was darker than before. She found the switchboard by touch. Her fingers moved to the line 7 jack. She lifted one of the old cords, fitted the plug into place, and turned the crank. Once, twice, the sound was small in the room. Dry metal. Old spring. A ghost of a ring traveling nowhere. Elsie held the receiver to her ear. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. No faint scratch. No distant bell. No breath at the end of the wire. Only the hollow silence of a line that might truly be dead. For the first time, doubt entered her cleanly. Not from Marla. Not from Reed. Not from Jonah. From the wire itself. What if she had built a warning out of grief? What if Edna's note meant something once, but not anymore? What if the people at the end of line 7 had been gone for years, and Elsie had mistaken the ache of being old for the sound of being right? She lowered the receiver. The room seemed colder than before. Then, in the dark beside the board, she noticed a torn corner of paper wedged behind the lower panel. It was brittle, yellow, and marked with a county filing stamp from 1983. Only one name was still readable: Harold Quinn. Elsie knew that name. Everyone did. Before he became a quiet old man at Mercy Ridge Care Home, Harold Quinn had been the deputy county clerk who handled every land transfer below the dam. Elsie folded the paper into her notebook. If the line would not answer, maybe the man who buried it still could. Mercy Ridge Care Home sat on a hill above the county road, close enough to see the dam lights at night, but far enough that people inside could pretend the valley was someone else's problem. Elsie arrived just after lunch. The lobby smelled of lemon cleaner, boiled vegetables, and old carpet that had absorbed too many winters. A television mounted in the corner showed a weather report with the sound turned low. Across the bottom of the screen, a blue band warned of continued rainfall through the evening. Elsie did not stop to watch it. At the front desk, she asked for Harold Quinn. The nurse on duty looked at her over reading glasses. Family? No. Friend? Elsie thought about that. No, she said. Not exactly. The nurse waited. Elsie placed the folded county paper on the counter. Harold's name showed through the crease like something trying to escape. I need to ask him about a map. That, for reasons Elsie did not understand, was enough. Harold Quinn was sitting near a window at the end of the East Hall, wrapped in a brown cardigan, one hand resting on a walker, the other curled around a paper cup of coffee gone cold. He had once been a broad man with a voice people lowered theirs around. Now his face had thinned, and his skin looked almost transparent beneath the afternoon light. But his eyes were clear. They sharpened when he saw Elsie. I know you, he said. You should. He looked toward the hallway, as if checking whether anyone had followed her. Telephone lady. Elsie Marr. I remember. She sat across from him without being invited. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the window, rain tapped softly against a metal awning. It was the same patient rain that had followed Elsie from the courthouse to the exchange, from the exchange to her kitchen, and now here. She unfolded the brittle paper and laid it on the table between them. Harold stared at his own name. His expression did not change quickly. It closed one small door at a time. Where did you get that? Behind the lower panel of the old switchboard. That building is condemned. So everyone keeps telling me. Harold pushed the paper back with 2 fingers. I handled hundreds of county files. If you want me to remember one scrap from 40 years ago, you came to the wrong old man. I came because your name was on it. My name was on many things. Lower Valley Camp. The paper cup trembled in Harold's hand. Not much. Enough. Elsie saw it, and the room around them seemed to grow quieter. Harold set the cup down too carefully. That place is gone. That is what they told us. Then they told you right. Did they? His jaw tightened. Mrs. Marr, I am tired. So am I. I cannot help you. You already did. He looked at her then, and she saw fear. Not confusion. Not annoyance. Fear that had survived longer than his strength. Elsie opened her notebook to the line 7 page and turned it toward him. Edna Rill wrote this after the dam scare in 1968. Harold did not read the words aloud. Never cut line 7. His lips moved once, but no sound came. Elsie leaned closer. Why would she write that if Lower Valley Camp was empty? Harold looked toward the television at the end of the hall. The weather map had changed. Bands of green and yellow moved slowly across the county. No one in the room seemed to care. Because Edna did not trust us, he said at last. Elsie felt the words land between them. Us? The county office. What did the county office do? Harold rubbed his thumb along the seam of the paper cup. His hand shook more now. It was after the dam expansion, he said. Late 70s, early 80s. There were arguments about liability, insurance, flood designations. If homes were listed under the spill line, the county had to notify them, inspect access roads, maybe buy some of them out. No one wanted that cost. So they moved people? Harold gave a small, bitter laugh. People with money get moved. People without money get renamed. Elsie did not speak. Lower Valley Camp was not a camp anymore, Harold said. Not officially. It had started as worker housing when the old dam was built. A few families stayed. Then their children stayed. Some owned nothing clean enough to put before a lawyer, but they paid utilities. They got mail. They buried people in the church ground. And the county? The county called the area service lots. Maintenance easement, seasonal structures, storage, anything but homes. Elsie looked down at the notebook. The room seemed to tilt. How many? She asked. Harold closed his eyes. I don't know. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have left. Harold. He opened his eyes again, and this time they were wet. I signed what they put in front of me. The confession came out quietly. No drama, no defense. Only a tired old sentence from a man who had carried it too long. They said the people there were temporary. They said the new system would not need the old exchange. They said keeping those names in active flood records would hold up federal approval. I was deputy clerk, not commissioner. I told myself I was just filing what others decided. Elsie heard Edna's voice in her memory. Ask who stopped listening. Did Edna know? Harold looked away. Edna knew enough. She came to the office twice. Maybe 3 times. Asked why line 7 was not in the revised emergency index. My supervisor told her the camp had been cleared. And you? I stood at the cabinet and said nothing. There it was. Not the whole truth, but enough to make the floor appear beneath Elsie's feet again. Line 7 had not been a fantasy. Lower Valley Camp had not simply disappeared. Someone had changed the language around it until people became easier to ignore. Harold reached into the pocket of his cardigan with slow fingers and drew out a small key ring. No keys hung from it anymore. Only a flat brass tag, worn smooth at the edges. File room tag, he said. Old index cabinet. They cleaned it out years ago, but some scans went to Public Works before the transfer. If there is anything left, it will be there. Why keep this? Harold's face folded inward. Because cowards keep souvenirs too. Elsie did not comfort him. Some guilt deserved to sit in the room a while. She took the brass tag. At the same hour, across town, Reed Carver sat alone in the Public Works records room, with his tie loosened and the county flood database open on his laptop. He had not meant to keep looking. That was what he told himself. But Elsie's sentence would not leave him. Every residence the county still names. So he searched the old scanned archive for Lower Valley Camp and found nothing. Then he searched LV Camp. Nothing. Then LVC. Nothing. Finally, he searched line 7. One result appeared. A scan from 1983. The image was crooked, gray, and badly labeled. Most of the route had been crossed through with a thick black line. But beneath the mark, Reed could still make out part of an emergency index. Mar Farm East, Hollow Bend, Pike Crossing, Pump House. Then, the black line. Then, barely visible beneath it, Lower Valley Camp. Right Sotbeck. For the first time since the project began, the map on his screen no longer looked clean. It looked edited. Outside, rain began hitting the windows harder. On the dam monitoring page, one sensor flickered yellow for less than 2 seconds, then returned to green. The system marked it normal. Wright did not. Reed Carver came to Elsie's house before sunset with rain on his shoulders and a folder held under his coat. He did not call first. That told Elsie more than an apology would have. Jonah opened the door and stiffened when he saw him. If you came to upset her again. I didn't, Reed said. Elsie was sitting at the kitchen table with Edna's notebook open in front of her, the brass tag from Harold Quinn beside it. The room smelled of toast, damp wool, and the old cedar box where she kept things no one else knew how to value. Reed stepped inside slowly. For the first time, he did not look like a man bringing an answer. He looked like a man carrying a question that had grown heavier on the drive over. I found something, he said. Elsie did not invite him to sit, but she did not tell him to leave. Reed laid the folder on the table and opened it. Inside was a printed scan, crooked and gray, with a thick black line crossing through the middle of an old emergency index. Elsie recognized the order before she read the names. Mar Farm East, Hollow Bend, Pike Crossing, Pump House. Then the black mark. Beneath it, nearly erased, were the words Harold Quinn had been afraid to say. Lower Valley Camp. Elsie touched the edge of the paper. Where did you get this? Public Works Archive. Badly labeled. It was not connected to the current flood database. Why not? Reed's answer came slowly. Because someone decided it did not belong there. The kitchen went quiet. Jonah looked from Reed to Elsie, and for once he did not interrupt. Reed opened his laptop. The clean blue map of Millhaven Valley appeared again, smaller now, colder on the kitchen table than it had looked in the courthouse meeting room. He zoomed in on the bend below the dam. Current database, he said. These are the addresses assigned automated flood calls. White squares appeared along the upper road, the schoolhouse ridge, and the farms west of the pump station. The river bend remained empty. Elsie opened Edna's notebook to line 7 and turned it toward him. Reed began entering names by hand. Pike Crossing was active, but listed under a newer road number. Pump House had been converted to a county utility structure. Mar Farm East had been split into 2 parcels. Hollow Bend Schoolhouse was now storage for the church. Then came the names Elsie had not heard spoken in years. Baker Cottage, Tully Place, Old Dam Workers Row, Lena Holt, Caskey Twins, Lower Valley Camp, South Lane. Reed searched them one at a time. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then he tried old utility aliases. Service Lot 4, Maintenance. Parcelle B, Seasonal Structure 2. A result appeared. Not in emergency alert. Not in public safety. In utility billing. Reed's face changed. He clicked again. A list opened. Plain and ugly. 11 active utility accounts. Eleven. Jonah leaned over his shoulder. Those are houses? Reed did not answer at first. He opened one account. Then another. Then another. Electric service. Water service. Trash pickup. Late fees. Meter readings from last month. Billing names attached to physical locations below the dam spill line. They were not ghosts. They were customers. They paid the county to keep the lights on in homes the county's flood system did not recognize. Elsie sat back in her chair. The sound she made was not quite a sigh. It was the sound of a woman realizing that the thing she feared was true, and still feeling pain because truth did not make the years lighter. 11 homes, Reed said. People, Elsie corrected. He looked at her. This time, he did not soften the correction. He accepted it. 11 households, he said. Outside, rain began ticking harder against the kitchen window. Reed turned the laptop toward Jonah. The automated system pulls from the emergency residence database, not utility billing. If an address is not in the alert list, it does not receive a dam warning call. It does not trigger a welfare check. It does not appear in the evacuation route planning. Jonah's face had gone pale. So Aunt Elsie was right. Reed looked down at the scan, then at the notebook, then at the clean blue map that no longer looked clean. She was right about line 7, he said. But this is worse than an old line. Elsie waited. Reed rubbed both hands over his face, and for the first time, he looked younger than 34. The system is functioning the way it was built to function, he said. The sensors are not the problem. The towers are not the problem. The call software is not the problem. What is? Jonah asked. Reed pointed at the empty space on the map. The map. No one spoke. The old kitchen clock clicked once above the stove. Then again. Elsie looked at Edna's handwriting. Never cut line 7. For decades, she had thought the warning meant one wire. One route. One technical instruction from a supervisor who knew the valley better than the county did. Now she understood it had meant something larger. Do not cut the people off the map. Do not let clean paper become an excuse for silence. Do not trust a system that can only save the names it has been given permission to remember. Reed opened another window on his laptop. I need to file an emergency correction. Then file it, Jonah said. It will go through Marla's office. Elsie heard what he did not say. Marla could delay it, question it, send it to legal review, protect the contract, protect the county, protect the story that every active residence was covered. How long? Elsie asked. If she approves it? Maybe a day. And if she does not? Reed did not answer. The rain struck harder now, no longer patient. On Reed's screen, a small alert appeared in the corner of the dam monitoring page. It flashed yellow, then disappeared. Elsie saw it. So did Reed. "What was that?" Jonah asked. "Sensor variance," Reed said automatically. Then he stopped. The word had come from habit, not belief. He refreshed the page. All green. Normal. But Reed did not look relieved. He opened the sensor log. A thin line of yellow appeared, time-stamped, brief enough for the system to ignore, and human enough to worry over. Elsie looked at him across the table. "How much rain before the dam office calls warning stage?" Reed stared at the screen. "More than this," he said, but his voice no longer trusted the sentence. His phone buzzed. He looked at the caller ID and went still. Commissioner Marla Vance. A second later, Jonah's phone buzzed too. A county alert appeared on the screen. Not a flood warning, a public notice. Old telephone exchange equipment removal confirmed for Friday, 8 a.m. Unauthorized entry prohibited. Elsie folded Edna's notebook shut. The midpoint had arrived without thunder. 11 homes were missing. The alarms were still green, and the only system that remembered those people was scheduled to be cut out of the wall in less than 2 days. By morning, Reed Carver's office door was closed. That never happened. He was the kind of engineer who left doors open because open doors made work look transparent. But now Commissioner Marla Vance sat across from him with the printed scan on her lap, the county attorney on speakerphone, and Reed's emergency correction request glowing on his monitor like something already guilty. "You accessed archived public works files without authorization," Marla said. "I accessed county safety records. You accessed materials outside the approved project channel." Reed looked at the scan. The black line through Lower Valley Camp seemed darker in daylight. "There are 11 active utility accounts below the dam that are not in the automated alert list," he said. "That is not a paperwork issue. It is exactly a paperwork issue until verified. Then verify it." Marla's eyes hardened. "Through legal review. How long?" "As long as it takes." Reed almost laughed, but nothing in the room was funny. Outside the window, rain ran down the glass in wavering lines. The dam access road was visible from the public safety building, a gray ribbon disappearing toward the hills. Trucks had already begun moving that way. Marla leaned forward. "You are young," she said. "You have a good position here. Do not let one retired operator and one mislabeled scan turn you into a man who cannot follow procedure." Reed heard the warning beneath the advice. If he pushed, he could lose the project. If he lost the project, Northlake would blame the county. If Northlake blamed the county, Marla would make sure his name stood between her and the damage. He looked again at the map on his screen. 11 households. Not errors. People. Procedure did not put them on the call list, he said. "No," Marla replied, "and procedure is the only thing that can put them there now." That afternoon, Grant Peller arrived at Elsie Marr's house with a black umbrella and a smile too smooth for the weather. He introduced himself as Northlake Data Relay's regional site director. He wore a charcoal coat, clean gloves, and shoes that had never crossed a muddy yard by accident. Jonah answered the door, but Grant looked past him to Elsie, as if he had come to speak to the real obstacle. "Mrs. Marr," he said, "I understand there has been some emotional concern about the old exchange equipment." Elsie stayed seated at the kitchen table. Edna's notebook lay closed beside her teacup. "Emotional concern," she repeated. Grant did not hear the warning in her voice, or chose not to. "We respect local history. Truly, Northlake has no interest in destroying meaningful artifacts. In fact, we would be willing to fund a private archival removal of the switchboard before redevelopment." Jonah frowned. "Private? A professional team would document it, remove it carefully, and preserve it off-site. We could also provide Mrs. Marr a modest historical honorarium." He took an envelope from inside his coat and placed it on the table. Elsie did not touch it. Jonah did. Not to take it. To see the number. His face changed before he could stop it. Elsie saw enough. It was more money than she had in savings. More than the roof repair estimate. More than the overdue medical bills stacked in a drawer Jonah thought she did not know about. Enough to make an old woman's last years easier if she was willing to let a company wrap silence in tissue paper and call it preservation. Grant folded his hands. "The equipment is not legally operable. It is a liability where it is, but preserved properly, it becomes heritage." Elsie looked at the envelope. Heritage does not ring a phone. Grant's smile thinned. Neither does a dead switchboard. Jonah said her name softly. Aunt Elsie. She knew what he meant. Think. Be practical. Take the money. Stay safe. For a moment, Elsie imagined saying yes. Let Northlake take the board. Let Reed file his reports. Let Marla delay and explain. Let Jonah stop looking at her like he was watching her walk toward a cliff. Then she saw Edna's hand in memory, writing 3 words with a pencil worn almost to the wood. Never cut line 7. Elsie pushed the envelope back. If you want to preserve something, she said, start with the people missing from your maps. Grant's face emptied of warmth. He took the envelope and stood. By Friday morning, that building belongs to the redevelopment process. Not yet. It will. When he left, Jonah shut the door harder than he meant to. Then, he turned on Elsie. You cannot fight the county, Northlake, and a storm with a notebook. I am not fighting a storm. You know what I mean. Yes, she said. You mean I should be grateful they offered money to take away the only thing that proves they forgot people. Jonah's voice broke. I mean, I don't want to lose you. That stopped her. He stood near the sink, hands braced on the counter, shoulders tight. For the first time, Elsie saw not embarrassment, not doubt, but terror. They could arrest you, he said. They could say you broke into county property. They could take your pension. They could drag you through court. And for what? A line that may not even work? Elsie had no easy answer. Because he was not wrong. Truth did not pay lawyers. Courage did not patch a roof. A brass key did not stop a county attorney from putting an old woman's name on a charge sheet. I have been safe before, she said quietly. It did not help the people nobody called. Jonah looked away. Near dusk, Sheriff Cora Daly met Elsie at the old exchange. This time, there was no surprise in either of their faces. Cora had come in uniform, rain darkening the shoulders of her coat. She carried a new county padlock and a roll of red warning tape. Marla wants this sealed until removal, Cora said. Of course she does. I cannot ignore a direct order twice. I know. They stood beneath the back awning while rain dripped between them. Cora wrapped the warning tape across the rear door. Then she threaded the new padlock through the hasp and clicked it shut. Elsie watched her hands. Am I supposed to give you the key? Elsie asked. Cora did not look at her pocket. The lock is changed, she said. Your key should not matter. Should not. The 2 words hung in the wet air. Elsie understood. Cora had locked the door the way the county asked. She had not searched Elsie. She had not asked about basement windows. She had not taken the old brass key that opened doors older than county orders. Down the road, the dam siren tower blinked green in the rain. Green meant normal. Green meant covered. Green meant go home and trust the system. Then, far away, thunder rolled over the hills. Cora looked toward the dam. So far, she said. No warning stage. Elsie heard what she was really saying. Not yet. That night, the rain became heavy enough to wake her. It struck the roof in hard waves, filled the gutters, and ran in sheets down the kitchen window. Elsie sat at the table with Edna's notebook open, Jonah asleep on the couch because he had refused to leave her alone. At 11:42 p.m., the phone rang. Not her cell phone. The old landline on the kitchen wall. Elsie froze. Only 3 people still used that number. She lifted the receiver. For a moment, there was only breathing. Then Harold Quinn's voice came through, thin and shaking. Elsie. Harold? I lied. She gripped the receiver tighter. About what? About not knowing how many. Rain battered the glass. Jonah stirred on the couch. Harold's voice dropped until it was almost swallowed by static. Lower Valley Camp was not removed from the flood map because they forgot it, he said. It was removed after the dam expansion because the county could not afford what the new spill line proved. Elsie did not move. Harold was crying now. Edna knew, he whispered, and so did I. Then the line clicked, and the call went dead. Jonah drove Elsie to Mercy Ridge through rain so heavy the headlights seemed to strike a wall and break apart. Neither of them spoke much. The old landline call still rang inside Elsie's chest. Harold's voice had not sounded like a man confessing to clear his conscience. It had sounded like a man afraid the truth would outlive him by only a few hours. At the care home, the night nurse tried to stop them. Visiting hours are over. Elsie did not raise her voice. Then call Sheriff Daly and tell her I am here to ask Harold Quinn about 11 homes below the dam. The nurse looked at Jonah. Jonah looked back and said, Please. That was what opened the door. Harold was awake when they entered his room. A lamp burned beside his bed. On the blanket in front of him lay a thin folder, old enough that its edges had curled. His hands rested on it as if he were keeping it from escaping. "I thought I burned it," he said. Elsie stepped closer. "You didn't." "No," Harold swallowed. "Cowards hide things better than they destroy them." Jonah stood near the door, pale and silent. Harold opened the folder. Inside were copies of survey sheets, dam expansion notes, and a map stamped 1983 revised spill impact review. The paper had yellowed, but the red pencil line was still visible. It curved below the dam, crossed the river bend, and passed directly through the place the modern county map showed as empty. Lower Valley Camp. Elsie leaned over the page. There were boxes drawn there. Not many, but enough. Harold tapped one with a shaking finger. Baker Cottage. Widow with 2 sons then. One of them still lives there. Unless he died, and nobody told the county because the county stopped asking. He moved to another. Tully Place. They had a girl with bad lungs. They were supposed to get relocation review after the expansion. Another. Old Dam Workers Row. 3 units by then. Maybe 4. His voice thinned. The new spill model showed they were below the safe line. Not maybe, not if the weather was bad. Below. Jonah stepped forward. Then why weren't they moved? Harold shut his eyes. Money. The word sat in the room without drama because some sins did not need decoration. The county had just approved the expansion, Harold said. The engineers changed the spill estimates after the work began. If Lower Valley stayed on the active flood map, the county had to notify residents, inspect access, create an evacuation plan, maybe buy out the properties. Some did not have clean deeds. Some were worker cottages. Some were inherited without proper papers. It would have been ugly, expensive, and public. So they erased them, Elsie said. They renamed them. That was worse. Harold turned another page. A typed list showed old household names on the left and new designations on the right. Baker Cottage became Service Lot 4. Tully Place became Seasonal Structure 2. Workers Row became Maintenance Parcel B. Lower Valley Camp became County Utility Easement. People had not vanished. Language had swallowed them. Harold's mouth trembled. They said nobody was being denied service. They still had electric, still had water, still got tax notices when it suited the county. But emergency planning pulled from flood residence records. Once those homes were no longer homes, the warning system did not owe them anything. Elsie gripped the bed rail. And Edna? Harold looked at her then. Edna came to the clerk's office with your notebook. Elsie felt something inside her go still. She said if the county would not keep them on paper, the exchange would keep them by line. She said line 7 had to stay active even if the official route was retired. My supervisor told her she was interfering with county modernization. What did Edna do? She copied the old route index by hand. She tied the tag backward on the board so removal crews would not notice it. She told us if the new systems ever failed, that line might be the only thing that still remembered who to call. Elsie saw Edna as she had been. Iron gray hair, flat shoes, pencil worn almost to wood, voice low behind the switchboard. A line is not wire. A line is somebody waiting to be reached. Harold's eyes filled. And I signed the revision. Elsie did not speak. I was deputy clerk, not the commissioner, not the engineer, not the county attorney. That is what I told myself. I was just the hand that filed what men above me decided, but my name is on the transfer index. My initials are on the route retirement sheet. He pushed the folder toward her. I kept copies because I was afraid someday someone would ask. Then nobody did. Elsie looked at the papers but did not take them yet, because the truth had opened another door, and behind it stood a younger version of herself. She remembered Edna arguing in the hallway with a man from the county. She remembered hearing Lower Valley and inactive route. She remembered Edna coming back to the board with her face white and hard. Elsie had asked once. Only once. Edna had said, "Some people get erased slowly, Elsie. That does not make them gone." And Elsie, young enough to be tired and old enough to know better, had gone back to work. She had let Edna carry it. For decades, Elsie had believed she was protecting Edna's warning. Now, she understood she was also trying to repair the day she had not helped Edna fight for it. Jonah came to her side. This time, he did not tell her to stop. Harold took a pen from the nightstand. "I will sign a statement. You do not have to do it tonight, Jonah said. Harold gave a small, broken laugh. Son, tonight may be the only time left that matters. He signed slowly. His name shook across the page. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The room monitor beeped and steadied. Down the hall, a nurse said something sharp. Jonah's phone buzzed with a weather update. Reed's name appeared on Elsie's phone a second later. She answered. Reed did not greet her. The damn command center just lost outbound alarm sync to the Lower Valley call list, he said. His voice was tight, breathless. The system is trying to reroute, but the database is throwing conflicts. Elsie looked at Harold's signed statement, then at the folder, then at Jonah. What about the sirens? She asked. They are still active. A pause. Then Reed said, No, wait. In the silence that followed, Elsie heard the truth before he said it. The damn alarms just went silent. Elsie did not remember deciding to go to the exchange. One moment she was standing in Harold Quinn's room with the signed statement in her hand, listening to Reed say the damn alarms had gone silent. The next, Jonah was driving too fast through rain that turned the windshield into moving glass. Tell me what to do, Jonah said. It was the first time all week he had said it without fear hiding under the words. Elsie held Edna's notebook against her chest. Get me to the back road. Reed met them near the railroad cut, soaked through, laptop bag hanging from one shoulder. He had parked crooked beside the old exchange, headlights cutting across the red warning tape Sheriff Cora had placed there hours earlier. The command center is still trying to restore outbound sync, he said. But the missing households are not in the call tree. Even if it comes back, it may skip them. Then we do not wait for it, Elsie said. The new padlock held the back door shut. Jonah looked at it, then at Elsie's coat pocket. Your key? Not for that lock. Reed stepped forward with a tire iron from his truck. For 1 second, all three of them stood still. A county engineer, an old telephone operator, a nephew who had spent days begging her to stop. Then Jonah took the tire iron from Reed. If someone is getting blamed, he said, let them blame me too. The hasp cracked on the third strike. The back door opened into darkness. Inside, the old exchange smelled colder than before, as if the building itself had been holding its breath. Rain hammered the roof. Water dripped somewhere near the front hall. Elsie moved by memory, one hand on the wall, one hand on the notebook. Reed set his laptop on the operator shelf and shone his phone light over the rows of brass jacks. I don't know how to run this, he said. You don't have to, Elsie answered. You have to tell me which lines still have copper. He stared at her for half a second, then understood. Reed pulled a small tester from his bag and began checking terminals below the panel. Jonah held the light. Elsie stood before the board, breathing slowly, forcing her hands not to shake. Mar Farm East, Hollow Bend, Pike Crossing, Pump House, River Bend. Then the backward tag, L.V. Camp, Line 7. Reed's voice came from below. Weak continuity, not clean, but something is there. Something. That was enough. Elsie lifted the cord and fitted the plug into the jack. The motion was old, older than fear. Her fingers remembered what her mind could not afford to question. She turned the crank once, twice, 3 times, then lifted the receiver. At first, only static. Then a faint ring came back through the line. Jonah stopped breathing. Elsie turned the crank again. A click. A man's voice, far away and angry with sleep, came through the receiver. Who is this? Elsie closed her eyes. This is Millhaven Exchange, she said, and for a heartbeat she was 27 again, Edna standing behind her, rain on the windows, Valley waiting. Listen carefully. Dam alarms are down. You are below the spill line. Wake everyone near you and get to high ground now. The man cursed once, not at her, but at the world. Then, he shouted a name away from the phone. A woman's voice replaced him. Who else knows? You do, Elsie said. And you have to make the next call. She plugged the next cord. Reed read from the notebook while Elsie connected. Baker Cottage. Ring. Tully Place. Ring. Old Dam Workers Row. Ring. Service Lot 4. Ring. Seasonal Structure 2. Ring. Each call began with disbelief and ended with movement. Boots on floors, doors opening, people shouting across rooms. A baby crying, a dog barking, someone asking if they had time to bring medicine, someone else asking about Mrs. Caskey, who lived alone. Jonah took the notebook from Reed and began marking answered lines with a pencil. His hand shook, but he did not stop. Outside, tires hissed on the wet road. Sheriff Cora Daly appeared in the back doorway with her flashlight raised. For one sharp second, no one moved. The broken lock lay near Jonah's feet. The red warning tape hung torn behind her. Cora looked at Elsie at the switchboard. Reed crouched beneath the panel, Jonah holding the notebook, and the old cord stretched from jack to jack like veins awakened under dead skin. "Elsie," she said, "tell me you are reaching someone." Elsie plugged another cord. "We are." Cora lowered the flashlight. Then she turned toward the rain and spoke into her radio. "This is Sheriff Daly. I need volunteer drivers to the Lower Valley Access Road. Church vans, farm trucks, high-clearance vehicles. No waiting for county dispatch. Move now." A voice on the radio asked under whose authority. Cora looked at the old switchboard. "Mine." That was when the community began to answer. The first truck came from Hollow Bend Church, then 2 farmers with cattle trailers, then a school bus driver who still had keys because nobody in Millhaven ever really returned keys when weather turned bad. Mechanics from Pike Crossing brought chainsaws for fallen limbs. The volunteer fire crew went door to door where the road dipped underwater. Reed stood in the doorway long enough to watch headlights move toward the lower road. Then his phone rang. "Marla." He let it ring once, twice, then he answered on speaker. "Where are you?" she demanded. "At the old exchange." "Leave immediately. That site is sealed. There are 11 households below the spill line that were not in the automated alert list," Reed said. His voice shook, but it did not break. "The omission traces to a 1983 route retirement and flood map revision. I am submitting a technical incident report with archive scans, utility records, and Harold Quinn's signed statement. Read. Do not send anything until legal." He tapped his phone. Sent. The report went to County Emergency Management, the State Dam Safety Office, the Millhaven Ledger, and every commissioner on the public thread. Only then did he look at Elsie. "I'm sorry," he said. She kept working the board. "Don't apologize to me yet," she said. "Call the next name." So he did. He read the names while she rang them. Jonah marked the answers. Cora held the door against wind and rain. And somewhere below the dam, old telephones rang in houses the modern system had forgotten. By June, the flood map of Millhaven Valley had changed. Not beautifully, not completely. Truth rarely entered public records like sunlight. It came in revisions, hearings, temporary orders, emergency corrections, and signatures made by people who looked tired when cameras were present. But Lower Valley Camp was on the map again. Not as a maintenance easement, not as service lots, not as seasonal structures. Homes, 11 of them. After the storm, the Millhaven Ledger printed the names on the front page, beneath a photograph of the old telephone exchange. Its back door hanging crooked, red warning tape, torn loose by rain and human need. State dam safety officials opened a review. County attorneys stopped using the phrase clerical legacy issue after Harold Quinn's signed statement became public. Commissioner Marla Vance did not apologize at first. She announced a temporary leave while the investigation continued. Her statement thanked emergency personnel, praised interagency cooperation, and said nothing about Edna Rill, Line 7, or the people who had paid utility bills for years without being worthy of a warning call. Reed Carver did not let that silence stand. At the first public hearing, he wore the same dark suit he had worn the night Elsie stood up in the courthouse. This time, his boots were muddy. His voice shook once when he explained how the automated system had worked exactly as designed and how that was the danger. A warning system, he said, is only as moral as the map it trusts. He did not look at Elsie when he said it. He looked at the commissioners. That mattered. For a while, people wanted to make Elsie into a statue before she had even finished living. The Historical Society proposed a display case. Northlake Data Relay offered to fund a polished exhibit after their site contract was suspended. Someone from the state suggested moving the switchboard to a regional museum where schoolchildren could press buttons and hear recordings about obsolete technology. Elsie said no. Not sharply. Just no. The board is not done working, she said. So the old exchange was not turned into a museum. The front room was repaired first. The roof was patched. The broken windows were replaced. The bad wiring was pulled out. The oak switchboard was cleaned, not polished too much. Its dents remained. So did the coffee rings on the operator shelf. The cloth tags were copied, documented and left beside new labels that gave each place its proper name. A small brass plate was mounted near the door. It did not say Hero. It did not say Memorial. It said, Millhaven, Emergency Backup Training Room. Every route must be verified by system, by record, and by person. Elsie approved of that. On the first training morning, 6 volunteers came. Reed came with diagrams. Cora came with a radio clipped to her belt. Jonah came carrying donuts and pretending that was the only reason he was there. And Nora Pike came early. She was 19, with rain boots, a dispatcher's headset too large for her head, and a notebook of her own. Her grandmother had lived near Pike Crossing. Her cousin's trailer had been one of the 11 homes the automated call list missed. Elsie watched Nora sit before the switchboard. "You do not start with the cord," Elsie said. Nora straightened. "Where do I start?" With the name. Elsie placed a route card on the shelf. Nora read it carefully. Lower Valley Camp, South Lane. Again. Lower Valley Camp, South Lane. Now, ask the question. Nora looked at the old jacks, then at the new emergency map pinned beside the board. Who lives at the end of that line? Elsie smiled then. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. The investigation was still open. Some families below the dam were filing claims. Harold Quinn had given a second statement from his bed at Mercy Ridge. Marla Vance had not returned to her seat. Northlake's lawyers were still trying to separate themselves from the county's old decisions. And there were people in Millhaven who wished the storm had passed without bringing the past up with it. But Nora asked the right question. That was a beginning. Later that afternoon, Jonah found Elsie alone in the exchange room. She was standing beside the switchboard, one hand resting lightly on the worn oak. "I thought you were trying to save the past," he said. Elsie looked at the rows of cords. "So did I." He stood beside her for a while. Outside, summer light fell on the railroad cut. The river moved quietly beyond the trees, as if it had never threatened anyone. But Millhaven knew better now. Maps were being checked, routes were being walked. Volunteer drivers were learning roads they had driven past their whole lives without knowing who lived at the end. Jonah reached into his pocket and placed something on the operator shelf. A new brass key. Elsie looked at him. "For Nora," he said. "When she is ready." Elsie closed her fingers around it once, then set it beside Edna Rill's old key. 2 keys, one from a woman who refused to let a line die, one from a man who had finally understood why it had to keep ringing. Near dusk, Nora returned to practice the route again. She sat before the board, checked the card, touched the tag, and turned the crank. The sound was small. Dry metal. Old spring. A voice from the past learning how to serve the present. No one in the room called it obsolete. No one called it antique. They only listened as the crank turned. And somewhere in Millhaven, a bell answered.